Hello, welcome to the Gatherers podcast. This is Stella Adina, and today I'm going to be interviewing Lisa Vossler Smith, who is the CEO of Palm Springs based Modernism Week, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary next year. And Lisa also has a fascinating side project called Tiny Palm Springs that she's going to be talking to us about today. Hello, Lisa, and welcome.
Thank you, Stella. I'm so glad to be here with you. It's such a treat.
To get started, why don't you share a little bit about Modernism Week and your role in the history?
Modernism Week is a nonprofit organization that runs two festivals a year in Palm Springs. It is still an 11-day festival in February, and then we have a festival in October as well. Modernism Week produces festivals that celebrate the mid-century modern architecture of the Palm Springs region. But over the years, through exploring modernism here in Southern California, it's grown into global modernism. So we really look at what was happening in the mid-century period, not only throughout the United States, but internationally, which is really how the whole movement started to begin with. It was an international movement starting with the Bauhaus and, that post-war period. We generally look at 1945 to the early 70s as our sort of mid-century period. And here we are now in 2024, coming up on the mid-century again of our new century. So pretty soon this architecture will be really old, but right now it's a baby boomer's age. It ascends all trends. It's about a lifestyle. It's about a simplicity of life and trying to live at least with form following function, where there's some order to your life and to the design aesthetic around you. That helps it brings peace, the less chaos we have in our lives. So the design aesthetic itself, yes, you're right, continues to transcend and morph into contemporary, modern kind of hybrids of mid-century influences. Here in Palm Springs, we still see it a lot in the roof lines and all of the different adaptations of mid-century modern architecture. But it's wonderful that we've been able to share through lectures and tours and double-decker bus tours and all of these things that we do during Modernism Week. We've been able to help educate our visitors and our residents about why this architecture is important and why we have to work as a community to save and preserve it.
And just to give context, this is no small event. Like you said, it's almost 2 weeks, 120,000 visitors descend on our
Yeah,
Coachella
that's
Valley
a
for
small
this.
year. And we always want to make sure that we're presenting, the best that Palm Springs has to offer. And so that's what we'll be doing, particularly this year as we kick off our 20th year celebration throughout the whole season.
You have your passport ready to go. You're taking Modernism Week on the road very
Yes.
shortly.
Yes, I'm leaving actually next week on Modernism Week at Sea. There's a group of 40 of us that are going on a cruise with Oceania Cruise Lines from Rome to Lisbon. So we're very excited to tour Italy and Spain and a little bit of France and end up in Portugal. We will be looking at architecture all along the way, though so much of the architecture in Europe, as you know, is, medieval, even going all the way back to, the early BC. So it'll be fun to put it in context with modernism.
Well, what I think is fascinating about Modernism Week is one, it's home in Palm Springs, which we'll talk a little bit more in regard to your side project. But Palm Springs it's central to so much of your life. Modernism Week, Tiny Palm Springs. So you moved here when you were 10 years old from Oklahoma. And when I think back on 10-year-old me in Ohio, that was my dream to move to California.
Mhm.
What were your impressions of California at that time?
Well, like you, I had seen California a lot on TV. I had come out here as a young kid, 3 years old, I think was my first trip to the desert to visit my grandparents. So I had been coming out. My through my childhood, and I was aware of Palm Springs, and it was mostly swimming pools and palm trees to me. That's what my memory is. But, all of the TV shows really glamorized Hollywood and Palm Springs and California in general. So when I arrived and moved to the desert, I really thought I had landed on Mars. I had never seen any kind of landscape like this. And the desert is a beautiful, majestic, epic place to live, as you know, Stella. But as a kid, coming from trees and lakes and parks and all of that, the desert seemed really barren and foreign and scary to me, even as a kid. So I really thought like they had plucked me out of my homeland and brought me to Mars. But my family, as you know, was in the golf course business and resort business. And so we saw travelers all the time. People from all over the world come to Palm Springs. And it does feel like it's this vortex where everyone passes through Palm Springs at some point. And so we get exposed to so many different kinds of people. And I think that was probably the thing at a very young age that started to influence me.
You mentioned your family and visiting your grandparents. Your grandfather, Ernie Vossler, was one of the pioneers of the Coachella Valley. Your grandpa?
Ernie Vossler is a Hall of Fame PGA Tour golfer, but to me, he was Dado. He was my grandfather, and I was so fortunate to not only grow up around him and with much of my family working for him, but I also got to work for him in my early adulthood. And so I got to share in sort of the magic of working with Ernie, which was a treat in itself. But my grandfather was a Hall of Fame golfer, very, very good golfer, great athlete coming out of Fort Worth, Texas. And he had grown up around Ben Hogan and a lot of the great early pioneers of golf. And he himself was a great golfer, moved to Oklahoma City, continued playing, and had married my grandmother, and they started having children and ultimately ended up with 5 kids. So he wasn't as easily ready to leave and play the tour, and he became a very prominent club pro that then started a development company, which ultimately led to Landmark Golf Company. And they built championship golf courses. They came to La Quinta and started developing golf courses and golf resorts in La Quinta, which ultimately grew to PGA West and Mission Hills. My grandfather, who was a very humble, modest man, came from humble beginnings, certainly, worked his way up to be a world-class golf course developer. And it was fun to work around him and see how he had legions of people that worked with him and that admired him and would come from all over the country just to meet with him. And so it was great to grow up around that.
Well, you spent much of your childhood at La Quinta Resort, and I've read interviews where you describe your childhood as much like Eloise in the desert. For those listening, La Quinta Resort has over 50 swimming pools, 800 casitas. I think it was built in
26.
1926. It's exactly 90 miles from LA, which was the distance that the Hollywood stars at that time were allowed to travel from LA when they were under context. And this is where you grew up.
Yes,
Even for adults, it feels like a playground. So what
it
was that
is.
experience like for you growing up in that environment?
Well, it was really special. At the time, our family business Landmark owned La Quinta Resort. And so the golf was developing, the houses were developing around us at the time. This must have been early 80s. And my mother, after some management experience at the hotel, became the general manager. And she continued on in that role all the way through my high school and college. And so, what seemed like my whole life, I was with mom working at the hotel. And so because it was my family's business, I could go to work for them at the age of 12. So I started working pretty young. And I had numerous jobs over the years at the hotel. Mom thought it was really important that I learn all of the different stations of, hospitality. And so we took advantage of that. But um, it was so special to grow up not only in that hotel and resort environment, which is paradise here in the desert, not only natural beauty, but people come here because of the weather. We have such mild weather in the
Mm.
winter that February is like spring. And so
The most
um,
perfect weather in the world is how I often.
the memories that I have so clearly are of special celebrities that came to stay at the hotel. And oftentimes they stayed for extended periods because they might be on break between films. They might be having a little nip tuck at Eisenhower. They might have been in the Betty Ford Center. It was just close enough to the Hollywood studios in the old days that the stars could get back. But imagine in those old cars on dirt roads going all the way out to La Quinta Resort, being exposed to celebrities and famous legends like Frank Capra, the director, actually lived at La Quinta Resort in my early years there. And I have wonderful memories that I treasure of being with him and going on photo safaris around the hotel property with our cameras and taking pictures of flowers and birds. And he had so much patience with me. He was such a good friend. And at the age of 11 or 12 years old, I didn't know really who he was or how famous he was. And so it was fun just to be with this great guy that took time, to teach me about cinematography. He didn't know that's what he was doing, but I really think he influenced even how I set up my shots now for Tiny Palm Springs, because I will wait for the light to change, or for the mood to be just right, or for the angle to look just right, and then I'll take the shot. And that was definitely influenced by Frank Capra. But over the years I got to meet Harrison Ford and Cheryl Tiegs and Don Johnson and Melanie Griffith, and Johnny Cash came to stay with
Oh
June
my
Carter.
God.
Oh, and Willie Nelson took me on his tour bus. It was
Oh
just
my.
such a charmed life as a kid. If I had known, how special that was. But I just thought I was at work. I was at my mom's work, you know? You know that
Well,
feeling.
let's talk a little bit about your mom, because one of the stories you shared with me about your mom, La Quinta Resort, is it's designed in what is it called, the hacienda style.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
800 casitas, and there's beautiful Talavera tile across the
Mm.
property. And you said it was your mom who went to Mexico and sourced all of that
Yeah,
Talavera.
she did. She did. She and others from Landmark went down there to meet with tile makers and potters, and they brought back incredible planters, some of those big pots that
Oh,
the plants were in. And all of the tile that you see from around the property was sourced in Mexico by my mom. At that stage of her career, she'd already been at the hotel for many years, but it was still the old rooms. They had not expanded yet. The expansion of the hotel made such a huge difference in the conferences and the events that they could host, that I really started being exposed to events and professional event planning through my mom at La Quinta Resort. I got to go to some of these amazing
mm,
events and conferences that were being held because she was there for the weekend
yeah.
to check in on things. And so I get to see a takeover at the hotel in those early days, what that would look like. And I definitely got an early bug for event production from being at the resort. And I think I thought that I would come back and just live at the resort when I was grown up. I just figured I'd be back and I'd plan parties at the hotel. But it didn't quite work out that way.
Let's talk about your mom. I remember you sharing that growing up, your mom was like Barbie, a really strong professional woman
Yes.
who had everything. She had the look to it too. Can you describe the influence as an adult on having such a strong professional mom as your mentor?
Well, she really was, because in the 80s, she was kind of that original power woman in business. She was in an industry that was very male dominated here in the desert: hospitality, hotels, golf, all of that. Very male dominated. She was one of the few women in business. And she was primarily a single mom for many years. And so she sort of ruled at the office and she ruled at home. She ruled like a queen. I mean, my mom has a leadership style that is very led by example. She is a real woman of decorum and diplomacy, and she likes people. So she gets to know them and she learns things about them and she makes them feel special and they enjoy working with her. So she really builds a community. And that's definitely what I've tried to emulate in my leadership style in work as well. We work like a small, tight family together and we support each other through the good and the bad, as you do, and our family business that was Landmark really had about 3,000 employees. And so we spent holidays together with them because we'd all be there working. And it was very much like a television soap opera where the guests are there having their New Year's parties and we're in the back with the staff doing the laundry and celebrating New Year's, watching the ball drop on TV. So, I mean, it was very much front of the house, back of the house. And because I did end up working every station from the cashier to the pie server at Sunday brunch. I worked in reservations. I worked in the gift shop. I was all over the tennis club. I think she just wanted to keep me busy. It gave me my own money and it taught me responsibility and definitely taught me customer service and taught me that I needed to go to college so that I would be highly employable.
Um, that's beautiful. Hearing stories of your childhood has definitely inspired me as a mom in terms of work ethic and how I want to foster that with my kids, having them work along me, all of the different exotic and glamorous back end jobs that there are that makes productions of that size work.
Yeah. Thank
Um,
you for doing it. It only makes your kids better. And
Oh God, they do. It's empowering. It's empowering to, at that age, feel like you're contributing.
true.
So recently, your worlds collided. You were keynote speaker at the National Barbie Convention, where you discussed the real dream houses of Palm Springs. And this event also saw the universe explode as you were meeting your online community for the first time on your home turf. What were the most memorable parts of that experience?
Oh, wow. It was so special. Just to be at the National Barbie Convention here in Palm Springs was amazing in itself. And, my knees were knocking. I was so nervous, just going and being around all of these amazing Barbie collectors for one. So it was exciting to be around that crowd. And almost the entire design team from Mattel came. But then to get to speak there and talk about not only what's special about the architecture of Palm Springs and why Palm Springs has such a special look to it, and what's that secret sauce that people want to bottle and take home from here.
Seeing our mountains
Yes, in the
behind Barbie Land was
they're painting a
jaw-dropping.
paradise. They're
Yes,
painting a paradise that
yes.
looks like our home. But it's true, that does look like the San Jacinto Mountains. I think they were very influenced by our desertscape and by the Kaufman House and the mid-century modern architecture of Palm Springs, highly influenced the dream house and that open floor plan, the stacked levels, and all of the homes that were around the cul-de-sac in the Barbie movie, and very influenced by mid-century modern design. And even her little pink Corvette is of that period. So the mid-century influence and Barbie overlap beautifully, which has been, years of content for me already and sort of what fuels my fire. But it all started because I was taking pictures of vintage Barbies in vintage clothing that had been given to me as a gift. And I found the photographs so intriguing. And then I thought it would be cute to have one of the dolls in front of an architecture of the same era. So I truly held a doll up in front of a house and took its photo, but I did it with enough depth in the perspective that it looked realistic. It was sort of a depth of field forced perspective is the term, for photographers, but it created a similar scale between the doll and the architecture. So it was so fun to see a vintage doll in vintage clothing in front of this 1960s house. And so that's really what got me started on Tiny Palm Springs. And so all of the worlds colliding between Modernism Week and my love for mid-century modern architecture, as well as Palm Springs. And the secret sauce is that we live in paradise and people go home and they just want to take a piece of it with them. But Tiny Palm Springs is something they can follow on Instagram and then see beautiful photos of Palm Springs and my dolls, my Barbie and Kens gallivanting around town with their glamorous lives as they do. And sometimes I tell stories, I get deep into these soap opera style stories. And sometimes it's just keeping up with the Joneses and seeing what they're wearing.
You started in 2016. You were anonymous for many years, like
Yeah.
many things blew up in 2020. But
Yeah.
one thing that always impressed me, and that's why it's so fascinating to hear about your time with Frank Capra, is the production value of Tiny Palm Springs is amazing.
Thank
It's so well thought out. It's so curated. There's such a point of view and a storyline. It's like you're approaching this as a filmmaker. And to hear that, yes, it was actually Frank Capra who
Yes.
inspired you. Amazing. I did not know that.
Boy, I don't know if I've ever made that connection either. So you heard it here first, right on the Gatherers podcast. I mean, I know for sure he influenced my photography, and I do create a storyboard. And if I'm going to shoot multiple locations, multiple wardrobe changes, I'm casting for the shoot, I'm selecting props, sometimes building furniture, sometimes creating entire dioramas. So you're right, it is quite a production. And that in itself is as joyous to me as the process of taking the photographs. So, taking the photographs and editing them and sharing them on Instagram is part of it. That's like the execution of the art. But the making it and the prepping for it, all of the production prep work that goes into it is also my joy. I get equal joy from both parts.
I love Tiny Palm Springs. I love the storyline. I love following it. I love how stylized and professional it is. But one thing I really love about Tiny Palm Springs is your comment section. When I will dive deep
Thank
into
you.
your comment section because it's like the happiest corner of the World Wide Web. Your followers love you. It's so positive. It's so supportive. How was it actually meeting this community in real
Well,
life?
great point, Stella. I mean, that's very astute. And the fact that you've read the comments share what I've experienced, which is that this is a joyous space on the web. And during the pandemic, when I reached out to this community and came out of the closet, let's say, I went public that it was me doing Tiny Palm Springs all these years. And some people got a good laugh out of that because they had been following and knew me and didn't put the two together. And some people were shocked, wondering how I have time. Where do I find the time to do all of this? In the early morning hours is the answer.
Well, and you pack them on your vacation.
I do. I take them with
Like
me when
Barbie
I
on your
travel.
carry-on.
I do. I pack them in my carry-on. You know this about me. This community that I reached out to in 2020, we actually formed friendships. It was glorious getting to meet them in person and to really solidify those bonds of friendship, because that's what hobbies do in the best case. They bring you together with a network of people that do similar things. It was just one of the experiences of a lifetime.
So, Lisa, in closing, I just wanted to share professionally 2 words that I feel describe you: diplomatic and decorum. In all the time that I've known you, I've never once seen you flustered. And I've known you for going on 13 years now. I've never once seen you flustered. For me, you very much represent the woman who has climbed the ladder of success and looked amazing doing it. And I imagine that that's not necessarily how you feel, but to the outsider, that is definitely my perception. So what tricks have you learned along the way to keep it calm, cool, and collected?
Wow. Thank you so much, Stella, because I kind of thought you were talking about my mom there for a minute. It definitely
Well, I mean,
sounded like
there's definitely parallels. You
the
obviously
parallels.
took notes,
Thank you. Thank you.
but you
Well,
shared about your experience with your mom. What are those tricks
she
running
always
this
looked
huge
cool
production?
under pressure. I will say that about her. I think used your words, decorum, um, and diplomacy, because she definitely stayed cool under pressure. And I try to do that when I'm freaking out on the inside. I try to just take a breath. And breathing has done so much, to really help calm my nerves. So I really do utilize deep belly breathing when I need to just reset my nerves. And so even right now, that feels good.
It's like your poker face is
Hmm.
naturally a smile.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Because
It's
I feel like
beautiful.
a deer in headlights. You're so sweet. Thank you. But another great secret is find a friend like you who has great fashion style, because you've always helped me look good for those special and important occasions. And, that's part of it. Dressing up for the part is very much like my Barbie shoots. I get to put on a costume for the day or for the week or for 11 days, and you get to go play a part in a role of Miss Modernism that I get to experience the best of Palm Springs along with our guests. I think as long as I can share on the outside the joy that I feel on the inside, I like to do that through dressing with color and style. My wardrobe reflects the happiness that I feel.
With Lola, I've shared with her how I don't always feel great. She was having a particularly low moment, and she said, "What do you do when you don't feel so great?" And I said, "I put on lipstick."
I know. I put on bright colors.
The brighter the color, the harder it was for me to like put on that
Be in a
smile.
bad
I
mood. I
painted it
know.
on.
I know, me too. Pink lipstick, bright colors. I do the same thing, especially if I'm under the weather. I
Mm,
put on lipstick and bright colors. That's sort of like picking yourself and dusting yourself, pick yourself up and dust yourself off,
yes.
is what
Yes.
that is.
So we have Barbie to thank for that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Barbie.
You
Like,
know,
super empowering lesson.
in so many ways she is a role model, and I had really forgotten about that as an adult. I was not engaged in the Barbie community until my 40s, and like many people, I stopped playing with dolls not long after I moved to California. I was about 12 probably when I put them in a box, and fortunately my mom kept them. And when I got them back, and I got all of my Superstar Barbie and Superstar Ken and all of the original dolls that I'd had, all of the memories just came flooding back. Oh my goodness, there's nothing like it. If you find your childhood toys, spend a little time playing with them, because playing is so good for the soul, and it's been so good for me, therapeutic even, particularly through the pandemic. So I always recommend to people, find the joy in that, and really revel in it for a little while.
Well, thank you, Lisa. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your history, your point of view, your perspective. It's really a beautiful world that you've created, and you live in paradise, but you're sharing it with the world, which is wonderful. So thank you very much, Lisa. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, and thanks for helping me share it with the world. You're doing the same thing, Stella. I'll
Thank
see you
you, friend.
soon.